All right, Alexander, let's talk about the fog of war in between Iran and Israel in this military conflict. And it is very difficult to get a clear picture as to what is happening. Trump posted on Truth Social a couple of days ago that the United States has he said we have air superiority. I said the United States. He said we, which is an interesting choice of words. You're hearing that a lot now from the U.S. Government, even from people in Congress. They're saying we now a lot more often when referencing Israel and Iran. But he said we have air superiority. Do we have air superiority, as Trump puts it? Does the United States and Israel have air superiority? Because the news that I'm getting is that missiles are being launched from both sides.
Yeah.
And they're just and a lot of damage is being done by both sides.
Yeah.
What do you think is going on?
Well, I'm going to first of all say, going back to the first part of your question, that there is a massive amount of misinformation and propaganda being spread by both sides. It is also the case that after the first day, when the big attacks happened, the Israelis launched their big strike on the night of the 12th of June, and over the course of the 13th of June, the Iranians then launched their big strike on the 13th of June and the 9th. But ever since then, each side has been gradually tightening up its media control. And the Iranians now have been clamping down on the internet. They've considerably reduced the internet coverage across Iran. And the Israelis are now imposing censorship, much more assertive censorship than they did previously. So all of this is creating a great deal of difficulty in understanding exactly what is going on. But you're absolutely correct. The reality is this: as far as I can tell, the Israelis are able to launch strikes against targets inside Iran. Now, there is some claims circulating that, in fact, these strikes are being launched mostly by Israeli aircraft operating outside Iranian airspace. That the Israelis fly close to Iranian airspace, but they don't enter Iran itself, because the Iranian air defense system, has to some extent got its act together over the last couple of days, and that the strikes are being mostly conducted from Iraqi territory. And if you look at the map of where the strikes are, most of the Israeli strikes they seem to be overwhelmingly concentrated in western Iran. And that is consistent with the strikes being carried out by Israeli aircraft operating from Iraqi airspace. The Israelis do send drones over Iran, and some of these are strike drones, but the Iranians finally seem to be succeeding in shooting some of these drones down. So there is that side. The Iranians, for their part, are able to launch missiles against Israel. And the Israelis were clearly very embarrassed by reports that were starting to appear over the last couple of days about the ineffectiveness of their air defense system. But the result is that they've tightened up very, very considerably. And they've been trying to spread stories playing down the significance of the Iranian strikes. But the fact is that the Iranian strikes are still continuing. And we are starting to get reports in the American media, in the Wall Street Journal and the Washington Post, that the Israelis are indeed, exactly as we predicted on these programs, running out of air defense interceptors. So it may be that the reality is that the Israelis do not have the undisputed and unchallenged aerial dominance over Iran that they're leading us all to think. And that the reality is that, yes, they can strike targets in Iran, but from a distance, and that Iran is able to strike targets at Israel, obviously from a distance also.
Do you have any idea of Iran's situation with missiles?
Nobody does.
Nobody
You
does.
had completely contradictory stories here. Some say that they have a stockpile of up to 40,000 missiles. I mean, I've seen that figure. Others say there's a stockpile of 3,000 or 2,000 missiles. Nobody knows. And the Iranians, for obvious reasons, are keeping this all very much to themselves. So we don't know. I mean, we don't. There is so much about the situation that we don't know. I'll give an example of the misreporting that there is. The Israelis said that they'd expected that in the first days of an attack on Iran, the Iranians would launch strikes and 5,000 Israelis would be killed. I'm going to say straight away, I don't believe that story. I don't believe that the Israelis ever imagined that they would lose that number of civilians in the first days of the battle, of any kind of battle with Iran. If they really believed that, they wouldn't have launched the battle in the first place. And what was the point of creating this elaborate air defense system if they really thought that was going to happen? Then they've also claimed that only 20 Iranian missiles have got through and only 2 drones have done so. But when you actually read the article that made that claim, they said only 20 Iranian missiles got through and hit civilian areas. So Iran isn't just striking civilian areas, they're also attacking military facilities. So even if that figure of 20 missiles getting through is true, it doesn't tell you everything about what the Iranians might be hitting elsewhere in Israel. But how deep, how large Iranian capabilities are, I don't know. We have no information about that, but we do have some information from the American media, which I suspect is well sourced, that Israel is indeed starting to run out of air defense interceptors. That is the only piece of information that I would consider reliable out of all the masses of information we have seen over the last couple of hours. And one report said that the Israelis can keep up the level of air defense they have at the moment for roughly 12 more days. But after that, serious problems will begin.
If Iran
is able to
pace,
continue
right,
to launch strikes,
which we don't know,
which we don't know whether it can.
Yeah. So my final question is Israel may be at may have 10 to 12 days for as far as air defense and missiles go, but they have the United States at their back. So the next question is how much does the U.S. have, given everything they've poured into Ukraine and all around the world? Or how much are they willing to use in the Middle East?
Well, they have a lot more than Israel does. I think that's the first thing to say. But they don't have that much. Now, they do have there are apparently roughly 3,000 Patriot missile interceptors available around the world. The trouble is, not all of them are controlled or in the ownership of the United States. Apparently, fewer than half of them are. Supposedly, if a missile is launched against a target, then you need 2 missile interceptors to have some confidence of being able to shoot it down. So let's say that the Americans have around 1,200 Patriot missile interceptors, then they can perhaps have some hope of shooting down, say, 300 to 600 missiles that Iran launches. But does Iran have those 300 to 600 missiles? I mean, I simply don't know. So, the Americans also, of course, have enormous capabilities to strike missile launch facilities. It seems a lot of these missiles are being launched from underground silos, but the United States might be much better equipped to destroy those silos, So there's lots of uncertainties here. The United States also, of course, has a very large stockpile of cruise missiles that it can launch against Iran. I mean, it can launch huge numbers of Tomahawks against Iran. But again, the stockpile of these is not unlimited, and they're expensive, and they're not easy to produce. And serial production of these cruise missiles is not unlimited. And Iran is an enormous country, as we've discussed many times. So one can imagine that if there's an aerial campaign against Iran, things will start to get depleted on the American side fairly quickly also. So, the burn rate in these campaigns can be very high. And the US probably doesn't have the indefinite resilience in terms of burn rate, especially as if we're talking about Tomahawk missiles, it needs to keep a significant inventory back in reserve in case it finds itself in conflict with China at some point in the next few years. So there are limitations on this.
Yeah, exactly. There are limitations on all sides. Okay. We will end the video there. The Duran.locals.com. We are on Rumble, Odyssey, BitChute, Telegram, Rockfit, and X. Go to the Duran shop, pick up some merch like what we are wearing in this video update. The link is in the description box down below. Take care.